Hello, and I welcome you all to World Affairs. I'm Prashant Dhawan. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, subscribe to World Affairs English. Now, before we start discussing this topic, the leader of the global south, India's biggest geopolitical move, before we discuss all this, let me show you an image. Now, over here, you can see this beautifully drawn map. And you will also see this red line that sort of divides this map into two halves. This line was created in 1980s and this is called the Branded Line. It divides the world into two halves. The north side, as you can see, is made up of predominantly wealthy countries, the developed countries where people have a better lifestyle, people are more wealthy, whereas the southern part is relatively poor. Now, obviously, most of you will probably look at down here at Australia and say, wait, why is this curve being drawn here? Why isn't Australia considered a part of the southern region of Earth in the Branded Line? Well, the reason behind of that is very simple. Both Australia and New Zealand are very developed nations, so they were kept on the northern side of the Branded Line. And as the years rolled by, we saw that this Branded Line gave birth to a much larger concept, the concept of a global north, a rich global north and a poor global south. Obviously, one thing you will notice is that in the Branded Line, since this Branded Line was made in the 1980s, at that time USSR was still in existence, so most of the Central Asian countries that at that time were part of the USSR have been kept in the northern side. But today, when we look at the rich countries and the poor countries, the rich global north and the poor global south, we actually include the Central Asian countries as part of the global south. And if humanity is to prosper, if we want to make our planet a better place, if we want to ensure that every human being lives a life of dignity, it's important that the disparity, the difference of wealth between the north and the south, it must be bridged, it must be brought down. And this is the core basis of India's biggest geopolitical move. India has decided that it will actually become the voice of the global south. All the countries that you see in the global south, if you count them all, they are roughly about 120 countries. Most of these nations are rich in natural resources. They have had a huge civilizational past. If you look back a few thousand years ago, global south was actually much more prosperous and rich than the global north. So there are a lot of aspirations in global south, a lot of countries that want to reclaim their past glory. And India recently hosted a mega event. It was called the Voice of the Global South. And during this event, India made its aspirations clear that we want to be the voice of these 125 countries in the global south. The United Nations right now, as it currently stands, is a frozen mechanism. If you just look at UN, 4 of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council belong to the global north. We have just one seat in the global south. So it's very important that the global south unites under one voice. Now, obviously, one question that will come to your mind is, are we talking about North versus South? Is India trying to lead these 125 countries towards a economic struggle against the North so that we can economically uplift ourselves? What is India trying to do? And shouldn't United States and Europe be worried about this concept of the global South? Well, the answer of these questions is no, not really. India is not really uniting the global South against some kind of a struggle against the global North. No. What India is proposing is a better partnership, a better understanding at the World Trade Organization, at UN, at various other bodies, where the global south also gets a reasonable amount of benefit from the progress that humanity as a whole makes. And India's version of a global south is much different than the Chinese version. Yes, China has aspirations of its own global south, and they have often hinted at a rivalry between global north and global south. According to China, in their version of global south, there will be military alliances, there will be friction between north and the south. You can even say that China aspires to create its own NATO to rival the North Atlantic Treaty Organization that dominates the global north. So if you look at this from an American perspective or perhaps even a European perspective, they would much rather prefer and India led global south. They would much rather prefer India to become the voice of the global south rather than China leading the global south against the north, because that will be a completely different story. So, can we say that there is perhaps a small rivalry between India and China regarding the leadership of the global south? You can say that, yes. I mean, look, when India hosted this giant summit, Voice of the Global South, China participated as well, but India announced that India will create a Global South Center for Excellence in India that will work as a uniting center for all of the 125 Global South countries. And right now, what are the two main issues that impact the Global South? Well, the two main issues are number one, Green Energy Fund. The global north countries have had a much higher contribution to global emissions, and yet they haven't created a green energy fund to finance the global south countries so that we can transition to a much more cleaner form of energy. This is very important to fight climate change, because in the end, this will not just impact the global south, it will also impact the global north, albeit the brunt of the impact will be faced by the global south countries. And then there is the issue of the Ukraine-Russia war. Now, the Ukraine-Russia war is predominantly, you can say, a global north topic. It's a global north issue, but it has spilled over to the global south. Because of the conflict, the oil prices have risen around the world, and now the global north is pushing, you can almost say forcing the global south to isolate Russia, to isolate Russian food, to isolate Russian food exports, Russian energy exports. This is a difficult task for the global south. So right now, at least for the time being, these are the two main uniting factors for the global south. And this can be an opportunity for India as well. India can actually emerge as a very important geopolitical powerhouse by becoming the voice of the global south. Because, as I said earlier, the north would much rather prefer a sane, a reasonable India leading the global south rather than an aggressive and belligerent China leading all these 125 countries. Now, this here is the end of the video. If there is any other topic that you want me to discuss over here, please mention it in the comment section below. I always listen to what you guys have to say, and I will try my best to make a Hindi version of this video on World Affairs Hindi channel very soon. So thanks for listening, and God bless you all.